Good morning to everybody. My name is Raffaella Gozzolino, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to you today about how developing an outline for a master and PhD thesis proposal. First of all, I would like to talk to you a bit about Editage. It is a comprehensive services platform and AI solution that are designed to meet the need of researcher at every step of the way. Editage help you out indeed in finding what exactly you need to pursue the research in all different steps by editing your manuscript, translating your manuscript, providing publication support, or helping you out with infographic and videos. But they are also having a variety of products that are really designed to keep the need of the academic community in terms of helping you with the writing, helping with the research discovery and outline illustration. They are also providing this guidance and support throughout your academic journey in many different ways. So the Editage has over 22 years of experience, has been recommended by more than 2,000 journals. Worldwide, we are a very big family because we are more than 2,500 experts that are collaborating to help you out according to the need that you present. In-house, there are more than 1,300 experts that are really accomplishing all the requests that they are receiving. And actually, we serve altogether almost 1 million clients and executed more than 2 million projects. So really is helping you out in breaking barriers between the necessity that you might have and the expertise actually that you would like to provide. So now just a bit something about me. So my name is Raffaella Gozzolino. I was born in Italy where I took actually my bachelor and the master in chemistry and pharmaceutical technology at the University of Parma. And then I moved to Spain where I continue with a master study and a PhD in cell biology at the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Lerida. So then I moved to Portugal, where I'm currently talking to you right now, where I'm a group leader at Nova Medical School, at Nova University of Lisbon, and I direct my own research lab. And I'm also the founder of Diaspora Mundi, which is a network of professionals that join together to leverage the quality of education and science in the African continent. So I'm also a member of the board of directors of the International Society for the Study of Iron in Medicine and Biology, the co-chair of a Canadian NGO operating in Africa and especially in West Africa, teaching about the development of ocean technical capacity. I'm a member of the International Committee for Funds Attribution to Research Project in 10 European countries and 2 extra-European. And I'm an editor of more than 12 international peer review and scientific journals. And I'm very glad actually to talk to you right now. So during the writing of your thesis proposal, regardless whether this is a master or a PhD type of study, so you enter through a very different kind of emotion that goes from despair to reward when you actually are able to accomplish all the intention that you have with the writing and the deadline matching, but also you feel very tired because it's an exhaustive process, right? It's something that we are not doing that every day. We are doing that because of we need actually to provide the elements for the jury to give us the title and to close an important chapter of our life. So just feel the emotions and do not be scared of every emotion that you might have. So this is actually the workshop outline for today. We will talk about the differences between writing a thesis or writing a journal article. And then we provide an outline for thesis and dissertation proposal and 10 rules for structuring papers and some tips for a successful writing. So let's start from the very beginning by look at the differences between the two types of writing, thesis on one hand and journal article on the others. So first of all, the purpose, right? So the purpose of writing a thesis is purely educational because the thesis demonstrate what you have done and demonstrate how much you know about that subject, right? So you need then to be evaluated to take a certain degree. But journal article is not for an educational purpose, although it's true that it is for spreading knowledge worldwide, but it also allows you to develop your career because as a scientist, we are evaluated about how many articles we are producing throughout our career life. So journal articles for scientists are very important also to establish the credibility within the scientific community and to contribute adding knowledge to certain research line. But the potential audience as well is different because for a thesis, you show the thesis or you talk about your thesis with your educational committees or with your professors. So there are individuals that are evaluating you for the degree. But the audience of a journal articles is very broad because that is for scientists and research, not simply to learn, but also to look for ideas to continue the research project, look for new evidence that might confirm their hypothesis, and also to let's say, keep their cultural baggage about this type of research. So the thesis is as well much longer than a journal article because it can run up to a few hundred pages. Is usually is between 150 and 200 pages and contain about 20,000 words about. So, but of course, the journal article is very is short when compared to a thesis because in the thesis you need actually to describe all what you did during your studies. But for a journal article, indeed, there are studies assessing that the percentage of the results and therefore of your experimental training that goes into a journal article is less than 5% of everything you did during your study. So imagine that during your PhD, for instance, you are able to publish one research paper. So imagine that you work for a year to then publish one paper. So of course that you cannot insert in that paper all what you have done during the 4 years, right? So this is why it's much shorter. And it can range between 3,000 and 6,000 actually words, depending on the field and depending on the journal, because indeed you have specific rules that you need always to check before starting writing that article. So of course that the journal article are then very much screened even more than theses for plagiarism, and therefore you need actually to avoid copy and pasting on your article, also in your thesis. But remember that the journals has platform that really check specifically for that matter. So always try to rewrite with your own words, to put your own ideas into papers and paraphrase when you cannot do otherwise. So the abstract of the thesis is as well very different because it's much longer than what there is what is found in a journal article. So first of all, it's much longer. Sometimes it also includes an abstract in different type of languages, right? According to the recommendation of your university and the state where you live. So therefore, you need to count about 350 words, but in journal articles, these ranges between 150 and 250 words maximum. And also, it's very different because sometimes in journal article you might find abstract that are not uh, written in a narrative form as in the abstract of the thesis, but they are very structured by outlining the main concept of introduction, material and methods, objectives, results, and discussion. So regarding the thesis, the introduction as well is much more detailed because the students need to demonstrate their confidence about the topic, their familiarity with the existing literature on that topic, and develop a background, therefore, that is more extensive than what you would do in a journal article, which needs to be very clear but concise and include just the information that are absolutely required for the reader to understand the gap between the different areas of research that you are addressing. So the material and methods as well, it follows the same pattern. So in the thesis, you need to provide an extensive presentation of this session, describing in very careful details and precisely everything you did and the research approach that was better suitable for performing your experiments. But in the journal articles, again, is a very narrow type of description because you need just to describe the methodology that is referring to the experiments that you conducted, not showing that you did master indeed a lot of techniques, right, as in the thesis. So regarding the discussion then in the thesis, you needed to provide a detailed interpretation of the results because you need to demonstrate that you have a complete understanding of the data that you obtain and indicate the interest of future direction that the people might potentially would like to pursue. But in the journal article, this discussion is very much concise. You interpret just the results that you inserted in the article, discussing the main figure and addressing the research objectives, not of the general topics of that your article is reporting, but really of the results. So what those results means, right? And in the thesis, you can really speculate eventually even about the future type of direction that you not do such extensively in a journal article. In terms of references as well, in the thesis, you need to provide an exhaustive list because sometimes you might even have specific session and instruction to write that reference session in your thesis. But indeed, sometimes it goes up to 30 pages of references because indeed the thesis is much longer and therefore even all the references that you inserted in the introduction needs to be very well thought. This kind of concise writing that is focused on research article and journal articles allows you just to select a list of the important publication, the seminal findings of those publications, and include just the work that are really special to you to explain or to better characterize the phenomena that you observe in your research studies. So there are many journals that actually put up a limit for select the reference session, and therefore you really needed to be very selective. In terms of appendices, so in the thesis, those are mandatory because you need to provide a complete documentation. And what I mean for appendices are, for instance, the articles that you provide and you then annex to the thesis, or your CV that some institution needs to actually include into the thesis as an annex, or, for instance, other publication that you might have during your, especially your PhD studies in this case, because it's much longer, that are not your main project, but are related to it and you participated to, or conferences that you participated, just to put a list, and this is part of a thesis. But in the journal articles, the appendices are completely optional, are called supplementary information, and what they contain mainly is an additional description, if you don't have much space, of the material and method section, and all the experiments that allow you to complement the story, but are not as relevant to be inserted into the body of the main manuscript. So let's see now some outline for thesis, dissertation, and proposal. So what is, first of all, a thesis proposal? So a thesis proposal is an outline of your proposed project that is designed to define a clear question and approach to answer it, highlight its originality and or significance, explain how it adds to, develops, or challenges existing literature in the field, and then persuade the potential supervisor why you are the right person to undertake it. So this is really answering the question that has been outlined in this slide. But let's see some example, right? So there is no absolute standard format for a thesis proposal, because actually everything depends on the institution that you are enrolled in, and also the state that you are actually carrying out your proposal. Because indeed, I can assure you that at least in the states where I mainly lived, I started my scientific career, they have very different rules. So each university, therefore, has its own preferred format. You can check with your university website to see if they recommend any specific format guidelines, but you can also, and especially, talk with your supervisor to know in advance, actually, which is the format for you also to prepare and start preparing, not to leave everything at the last moment to then be stressed. So research proposal might also vary in length, so it is important to check with your department, and the supervisor can always help you out in that. And generally speaking, a proposal should be around the 3,000 words. So a thesis proposal is somewhat similar to other form of academic writing, because ideally it should include the following sections. So it has an introduction, it has a literature review that complements this introduction, and then it answers research questions and hypotheses, outlining out also the objectives, the methodology, that is also important, the outcome and significance, so describe what you think the supposed outcome will be, and explain how it will add to the existing knowledge of the field, is a sort of impact of your research study for the scientific community. And then the time frame, right? So you need always to mention a tentative time frame for the project, and how you plan to work within that time frame. And that is always, you need to write everything to usually enroll into the master or PhD course, and therefore this is a way that the university might screen as well your intention, and talk with your supervisor in case something needs then to be changed. So there are crucial elements in a good research proposal. So first of all, the title. So you need to really make sure that include important keywords that will relate to your proposal, and therefore supervisor might also want to give you a clue about it, because usually then those keywords might be used also to search the topic that you are working on, by finding schemes, finding entities, or others, colleagues that would like to establish collaborations with you. And therefore, you need really to make sure that the titles goes beyond the simply describing of the subject matter, but it needs to give an indication of your approach, or the key question that you would like to answer. So try to find a title that really can catch the attention and can actually report what is your research about, just by looking at it. So the introduction is basically an overview of the entire research study that you are conducting. So you need to provide a short overview of your research and where it fits within the existing academic discourses, the debates, or the literature. So you need, in this case, to be really sure to establish a solid and convincing framework for your research, which should include the research question and the reason for which you would like to address them, then the major approaches and the rationale behind it, the significance of your research, so the impact that your research might have within the academic fields, or joining and bridging other areas of knowledge, in case it is more a multidisciplinary type of study. So to what concerns the literature review, you really need to frame your research and the positioning your research at the central stage of what is already known about that specific field, right? And that section should include actually the text that you believe are more important for the project, demonstrating especially what you understand and how much you understand regarding these research areas, and um, how your investigation might really fill the gaps that you spotted on these area of knowledge, also not simply from a theoretical part, but also from a practical part. Imagine that you are describing a new technique with a new equipment or a new tools, for instance, to perform specific experiments, right? So then you need to highlight why this new tool is important, and what was that oldest methods did not were not able actually to address. So this session is really intended to signpost and contextualize your research question. So why you do that in the context of what has been known already. So the method and research design is extremely important, because it allows also your colleagues, or allows people from other type of fields actually to reproduce the data that you have, and to eventually use the methodology that you use in your experiments to then obtain results in their investigation. So it's extremely important that this session to be really well explained, and should lay out the way in which you will structure your research, the specific method that you intend to use, and therefore you need to be really sure to highlight the specific technique and not just the general approach. And these should include a kind of research resources that are consulted, the methods for collecting and analyzing the data, and the specific techniques in terms also of statistical analysis, doing a brief rationale for adopting those methods, right? So therefore, you need actually to provide the reader of your proposal the meaning, to say, okay, so he or she really thought very carefully about the methodology and the research design that he or she will conduct. Okay. And then the references. So the references should provide the reader a good sense of your grasp on the literature. So you really needed to be sure to reference the text and resources that you think they will play a larger role in your analysis. So the seminal findings or the seminal paper that dictated the ground of your research. And remember that this is not a simply bibliographic listing, in the sense that everything you read, you write it as a reference session, but it needs to be a very critical reflection in the selection of the appropriate test, papers that are very meaningful, paper that were impactful when published, paper that are still potentially provide a reference even decades after their discovery, but because they really set the ground for the field to start to be built in that area. So there are some pitfalls that you might incur into. So you need always to make sure that your research ideas, question or problem are very clearly stated and addresses the demonstrable gaps in the existing literature. And this is important because indeed what everybody is looking after is the novelty and the innovation of the study. And to be innovative, indeed, you need to fill gaps in the existing knowledge. So then make sure that you have research departments to which you are applying to ensure that there are staff interested in your subject areas and available to supervise your project. For instance, making an example of what is happening in my university. So every student have a scientific committee that they can rely to help out with these kind of questions, in addition to the supervisor. So it is strongly advised, therefore, that you contact the potential supervisors that you spotted as people that you would like to pursue your research in very much advance, because there are busy people. So think that they have a lot to do, and therefore they really need time to prepare for it. And provide them with a polished version of your proposal for them to comment and potentially to give you even some more ideas on how to develop the research. Make sure as well that your proposal is very well structured, because it facilitates the organization of the ideas also by the supervisor, and ensure that the scope of your project is reasonable. And remember that there are significant limits to the size and complexity of a project that can be completed and written up in a limited time. What means reasonable, right? So I'm making here a very simple example for you to understand. If you're doing, for instance, PhD studies, and you wanted to assess the I don't know, the feasibility of using specific drugs, etc., in helping ameliorating disease symptoms. So one thing is to do it by studying in cells, and then eventually animals models to conduct that type of research. Another thing is you to be part of a clinical trial that takes much longer. So you cannot, of course, propose that as a PhD project, okay? Because you will never finish in analyzing data in a time frame of a PhD. So then make sure that your passion for the subject matter shines, and you can do it through the structure of your proposal and the argument that you present. So now I would like to give you 10 rules for structuring papers that you might want to follow. So this is the structure of the scientific manuscript. So it's very similar to a thesis proposal as we saw before. So it starts with an introduction, so with the literature review, then a method section, a results session, and then the discussion and the conclusion. And because of the initial letters of all these sessions, so this is called the IMRAD structure. So if we wanted to be a bit more specific and look which are the questions that every session is addressing to, so we know that the introduction is addressing what are you studying and why. So you need, therefore, in the introduction to establish the background of your research, the nature of your research problem that you would like to address, how the topic is important, and which is the novelty that you are tackling. And then you indicate, of course, the purpose of your study, the hypothesis, outlining also the intention that are behind the paper. So a sort of one sentence to describe the impact of that and the gaps that you are trying actually to address. And always outline the recent research that is relevant to your question review and the relationship between the different variables. So this is what the introduction is about and what should address. But then you also have other section, in particular the method section, that respond to the question, what did you do? And it's very important to understand then the results section, that is what did you find, right, with those particular experiments. And in the method, you needed to provide them information on the design, procedures, approaches, data, and so on, while in the results, you state the main findings and what was accomplished so far. So, and finally, you wrap it up with a discussion and the conclusion. So, what your findings mean and what did you learn from this study? And this is actually the structure of a research paper that is very similar, and you can follow also to write your thesis proposal. So regarding the rules that I was talking to you before, so we can start by rule number 1. So focus your paper on a central contribution which you communicate in the title. And this is why the title is very important, because it starts the communication. It starts showing the reader what your proposal or your paper is about. And it's very important because indeed the people that look for your paper are immediately spotting the title. Okay, so you need to transmit the central contribution, but also serve as a reminder to focus the text on transmitting the idea that you would like the reader to really have as a take-home message. So the rule number 2 is write for flesh and blood human beings who don't know your work. So it's very important that this step to especially make naive readers understand what you are addressing, which is the challenge that your research is addressing, and how you may address it with minimal effort, but being very precise. So you need actually to define very critically and clearly the technical terms, and you need also to think that sometimes people have working memory constraints and they only memorize a small number of items, so therefore are very much likely to remember the end of a list than not the middle. So you need always to think about yourself and your limits to then be able to write in a way that even for people that do not have a photographic memory can remember actually the most important part of the work, and not forgetting because eventually it's written in a way that is not encouraging actually the understanding. So this is a rule number 3. You always need to stick to the context, content, and conclusion. So this is why it's called the 3C scheme. So why was I told that? So if the context is missing, so and with this question, you can always understand why you need to focus a specific session on the specific item. or the question, so what, if the conclusion is missing, and the introduction, remember, that always sets the context, the result set the content, because they show the reader what the paper is about, and the discussion brings home the conclusion. So is something that you need to merge together, but if you follow actually these advices, you can easily do it. So the first sentence, therefore, remember that define the topic or the context. The body hosts the novel content put forward for the reader consideration. And the last sentence provided the conclusion to be remembered. If you think that the abstract might also be divided into this kind of classification, then it's easy for you to apply it to all different types of studies. So try always to optimize the logical flow by avoiding zigzag type of wording and the use of parallelism. Avoid these to promote similar ideas in one sentence in an alternate matter. So if you have an idea that is similar, try to continue with the flow. So, and put another concept explaining that idea immediately after, so the reader is not losing the flow. And then use parallelism, right? So the same word that might reflect the same concept multiple times is okay, but try to use some keywords that potentially allows you better to show the reader that you have understood actually even the way that the manuscript needs to be then written. So tell a sufficient story in the abstract. Try to convey the entire message of the paper effectively using the 3C rules. Actually, in the content, you might write the research setting, introducing also the gaps that are in the literature, why filling those gaps and providing the missing literature is something that we should matter with. So in the content, describe very carefully the novel methods or the approach that you use to fill the gap, summarizing the results, okay? So it is a summary of the results. And then in the conclusion, interpret the results to answer the research question and highlight how your conclusion can help the field to move forward to discover actually other important findings that then might open even door to other research fields. So communicate why the paper matters in the introduction, so highlighting the gaps of knowledge and methods and why your paper fills the gap and why it's important, but also deliver the results as a consequence of statement supporting those sessions with figures that logically connect the central contribution, right? So the results section need to convince the reader that there is a central claim supported by data and logic. The figures and table needs to show the most objective support data and or the step that culminate in the paper claim. And the figure and table are often viewed by the reader who skip directly from the abstract in order to save time. And indeed, this is something that I have to confess that creates sometimes some constraints because you don't know how to elaborate the figures and tables. So remember that the figures are very important to set the reader on the understanding of what was done in the study, and that therefore also the figure needs to follow a logic in terms of flow and in terms of being able to transmit to the reader actually a complete story of what was done in the research that was conducted. In the discussion, then, you need really to address the gaps that was filled, the limitation of the study over its interpretation, and the relevance and the impact that it might cause on the scientific community. So explain how these results filled the knowledge that was already published and put forward, but it's also good to set some limitation, because we cannot think that our study is the best study in the world. There is always way to improve our study with different techniques or with different kind of experiments. Therefore, let's say how the study can improve, because we also know that there are many people that would like then to do so, even if we change areas of experimental areas. So, but also explain how papers advances the field and provide the new opportunity to eventually breach areas of knowledge or open new doors for your colleague to fit in and discover new data. So the first discussion paragraph generally summarizes the important finding from the results section, because some readers skip over substantial part of the results. So it's exactly the opposite trend than an introduction. So you need here not to start with the general aspect, but you really need to start by addressing and interpreting the result that you get, and simply at the end of the discussion frame those results in the context of the scientific knowledge that was published. So it's exactly the opposite trend. So then you need to remember, and this is very important, to allocate proper time when you write each section, because indeed you need to discriminate which is the section that takes most of the time consuming in terms of finishing writing it. So allocate time where it matters. You cannot spend days, for instance, in deciding a title and then just leave half a day to write the introduction. Does not work like that, because otherwise you will not be able to accomplish what you are intended. So just in terms of title, abstract, figure, and outlining, allocate time where it matters. So the title, abstract, and figures are viewed by far more people than the rest of the paper, and the meta session is read least of all, which is sometimes a pity, because indeed the method is important in order to reproduce the data. So it's a session that is extremely important. But the methods session is actually the session that you can write faster, because during your experimental procedure, you always write how to do the experiments, the protocol, and the technique that you are using. So if you start already by the very beginning to write in a way that is complete and that is full of information, that it's easy to take that what you've written already and frame it into the context of a research paper, and then make an outline. So get then the feedback on how to reduce, reuse, and recycle your story, because it's very important that you get the feedback of the people that sometimes do not even work in your field of experience. And this because if they can understand it, that also other people might understand. And you always need to think that there are much more people sometimes that want to join that field study, that they can be interested in what you do. So get the feedback from peers and professors, but remembering that those are busy people, so you need to give a proper amount of time for them to actually provide you with comments and suggestions. So the reviewers are always extremely useful to read your story, and it's vital to accept the feedback in a positive way. Remember that people are doing that for free. They are dedicating their time for you to improve the story. So the minimum that you can do is really to consider the feedback that is provided. So, and here are some tips for successful writing. So, when you write journal articles, combine all elements that are motivation. So, the probability of success when you write an article to be published is low, because indeed the journals want you to and your research to accomplish a certain level according to level of quality in terms of the topic and in terms of experiments that have been conducted according to the journal that you are submitted. So the likelihood of criticism and rejection is nowadays very high. Remember that is one discovery that is actually published. It's not, you can never discover things over and over again, okay, in the terms of the same research field and the same experiment. So you make your discovery and then it's done, and is that is published, right? So the outcome, therefore, even if successful, sometimes is not very much rewarding for students, because there is a lot of effort that they need to put into having that study published. But doing research is fun, and the writing about the research sometimes might be considered not as fun, because you might not be used to do it, and you might prefer something that is more practical and operational. But remember that to do science is a real privilege, because indeed there are not so many people that are entitled to discover something, and this is the purpose of science. So this is something that is always stressing, meaning that how to write a lot, right? Because whenever you think about a thesis, is a lot of pages that you need to write, and sometimes the students are saying that this does not work for me because it's difficult, it's a struggle. Sometimes I needed to have a part-time jobs in terms of finishing the experiments and then start writing, and then therefore thinking, and I'm breaking between the practical and the theory. So this is something that is not pleasing at all, and therefore is very important to be organized and to develop a routine that then is manageable and is rewarding. So do not put too much stress on yourself, because if you put the deadlines, so then always try to accomplish, not to feel that you lost the chance, right? So the first barrier, therefore, is to set the time, and don't say you don't have time to write, but make time for writing. And then, indeed, this is the solution: to schedule your writing and then to stick to the schedule. This is why it's important not to say, in 3 days, I want to finish the introduction. Otherwise, after 3 days, if you did not finish, and it's sometimes unlikely that you do that, so then you feel much more stressed because you already missed one deadline and then delay all the others. So these are some tips for researcher to tackle the task of writing a manuscript. So before starting, just prepare yourself for writing. So mentally and psychologically say, okay, next week I will start writing my manuscript, and this allows you already to enter into the task that you need to accomplish, and then set a fixed time. In a manner that you can really accomplish that. So just to say, okay, I will start next week, and in 3 weeks from now I will finish to write my manuscript. So set a target of a specific word per day that you manage to write, and this is an example of setting 500 words, which is more or less half of a Word document page. And then write without stopping to edit. Don't think that the first time that you write, everything will be perfect to be submitted, and don't lose time in doing that. Just start writing, also for yourself to see that things are moving, and this is also useful then not to enter in the trap of writing block. that authors might sometimes have. So in terms of prepare yourself for writing, before sitting down to write, talk to somebody about the work that you are going to write up as a research paper. Uh, Try to at least talk to two people, one from your peer group and another from a different background, to join actually the interest, and thinking also that there are people from different backgrounds that might want then to join the field that you are working with. So it's useful as well to receive their comment about it and explain them what you did and what you found and what that means, to see also if they understand the way that you are telling the story. And then this talk will prime you to write, because you already started thinking about what you should put on a paper. And then it's easier when you sit down to write. So then set a fixed time. So imagine that you dedicate a specific timing per day to write a specific part of your manuscript, minimizing at all distraction during the time. So try to avoid having your mobile with, the music on, or to take calls, or having social media on, that might distract you. So try really to focus on what you need to write. And then if you are not able to write during the time, do not quit, because if you quit, then you start losing the routine. So in case that you don't feel like writing the introduction or a specific session, so try to do something that might be complementary, like for instance refining table and figures, or providing more references, or even do abbreviations list and so on. And then make the deadlines for yourself, because remember that anytime you accomplish a deadline, you feel a feeling of actually reward to have met that deadline, and this is also helping you out with the writing. So set a target of 500 words. So this is something that is feasible and compatible with other tasks that you need to do during the day. But then if you fail to reach the target, be prepared to extend the time until the target is reached as soon as you start again the writing. Because like this, you're not losing important and crucial checkpoint in your writing. So and then you can look at this website just to get some more tips about how to set targets. So, and then it's important that you write without stopping to edit. So think of a finished paper as a pottery project. And during the 2-hour session, your task is to get enough clay, shaping and refining the clay that comes later. And if you are stuck because a particular statistic or citation is not handy, simply insert a placeholder and continue writing, and then later search the file for the placeholder and replace the mark with an appropriate text. And this is a way that you keep organized yourself. So here are some practical tips, and this is the most important advice that I can give it to you. Read and read papers in your fields, or in fields that are related to your areas of expertise a lot, because that will allow you, first of all, to understand how papers are written, to gain more knowledge on the field, and also to have your writing in a way that you improve the ability of writing scientific reports, regardless of being manuscript or being a thesis proposal, and you really gain into the scientific and medical and or other areas of expertise type of writing with more confidence and familiarity, even with specific expression. The reading is what make your writing actually improving a lot. So being always proactive, so always try to understand why you would like to conduct that research, and how to do it, and think that you are the most knowledgeable person on that field. So, and that is achievable just if you do a full immersion in the reading all what concerns about that field and gaining more knowledge about it. So you really need to become an expert in that field. And with that, I would like to thank you a lot for your attention. So my name is Raffaella Gozzolino. I will stop sharing my screen right now, and I will be ready to take all questions that you need actually to be clarified regarding all the many doubts that you might have about this topic. Thank you very much. Okay, so I will start now to respond to your question. So the first question is, how should you prepare for the proposal defense and the potential question from your committee? So that is something that you prepare just by reading. So if you read the literature, if you become the most knowledgeable person regarding what is the research topic that you are conducting. So this is how you really prepare, because you need to think that evaluators are asking not simply some curiosity that they might have regarding the methods that you use, the specificity, the suitability of the procedure that you addressed, but especially they would like to see whether you can think out of the box, and your reasoning is then what is indeed important. And for that to happen, you need to extrapolate a bit your study and frame your study with other eventually in other type of context. For instance, if you study one disease, they might ask you, can I apply the same reasoning that you apply on investigating that specific pathology to other type of mechanisms that are defining other, clinical condition. So in these, you can do it just if you are an expert in your field of knowledge. Another question is how a novice researcher can positively use AI for writing proposal or papers. So everybody has been a novice researcher, right? So my advice to you is to use AI as a tool to get where you want to get, and not to rely on AI tools to write your proposal or paper. Machine cannot substitute human brains, although they seem sometimes even better, but it's not the case. So you need really to read a lot the literature, because you cannot take for granted some information that the AI tools are giving you. Most AI tools are not as specific as your reasoning can be when you join different areas of expertise. So if you use AI as a tool, you might complement the knowledge that you might have. You might ask AI platform which are the most important paper that you might want to read. But that is a starting point. And then you need to always verify yourself that tool is giving you the right instrument to conduct your research. Do not rely on those tools, because indeed are not as specific as you might want to think. And remember that who is evaluating your research is always a knowledgeable person in the field. So yeah, it is he or she easily spots whether you accomplish your writing with an AI tool or not, okay? Because the content is very different from the way you might write. Okay, so use it as a tool. Another question is, how do you address the potential limitations and challenges in your research design? Having, first of all, having more funds to perform more experiments. But indeed, so this is a more a PI and a supervisor problems that not the students, right? So you need to be very critical. And the way that you can be critical is to allow your peers to really read as well your research and your proposal. And then altogether, you can spot some limitation and challenges. First of all, you know already which are the challenges that you wanted to address. And you know as well that you might have some limitation in addressing it, because sometimes a statistical test is telling you that you need to add much more sample to have a statistical significance, or to have a clear picture of what is going on. So in this case, of course, that you might publish your research, or you might address your proposal by saying that you are studying this and that in this condition, but then to make a very clear conclusion, then you will need, for instance, to include much more data on patients, for instance, or on animals, etc., to be able to pinpoint specific targets. And that you can easily say it, and then you address it if you have the support of a team that is going to help you out, or if you, for instance, might supervise other students that might want to continue their research, or if yourself you might want to continue that research and make that niche as your own topic for a career development. But it's good to acknowledge that your study has XYZ limitations, because this is really much appreciated, even by an evaluator and also by journals, because so the evaluators can really understand that you have your feet on the ground, and not thinking that you might have discovered a cure for cancer, for instance, which might be unlikely because the multi-factor and the multi-aspect participating into it that is difficult then to address in a single study, and especially at the PhD level. But yeah, it seems you need to show them you are humble enough to recognize that your study has limitation, and that is a challenge in your research that even other colleagues might want then to jump in and address. So you might even, because of the limitation, establish even more collaborations, right, with people that are helping you out in that kind of research. Okay, so this question is, what resources or tools can help in drafting or organizing a thesis proposal? So the resources is first of all, you need to go and look for those resources and tools in your university's department, because you need to stick to the rules of each institutions that they might give you on how to write the thesis proposal, how to organize it. There are different ways to organize a thesis proposal, regardless of the standard template that you might get. The first thing as well that I would do in order to, if I was you, is also to talk to your supervisor and see the previous students that were mentored by your supervisor, how to actually outline a thesis proposal. And like this, you might even know in your own research lab how thesis needed to be made, in addition of the resources that your university can provide. Of course, that again, if you read types of thesis proposal that you might find even in the internet by a simple Google search, so you can also find the way to navigate through these challenges that you might have, and therefore find additional inputs on how to write it. But there are also AI tools that indeed you might want to use to base your proposal on. Again, use it as a tool, but they might actually provide you some critical comment on how to write a different type of session and how to approach different types of topic in your thesis. So also, I would like also to suggest you the fact that the Editage has specific services for that. So you might always want to rely on those services in order to improve your thesis writing. So the next question is, how should you formulate a strong research question or hypothesis? So the strong research question is according to the interest that you might want to have and that the group you are inserted might have. So that is how the research question and the hypothesis need to be formulated based on the science that was previously done, especially by the group that you would like to work with. But regarding how strong this research question can be, you really need to rely on experienced peers and on experienced supervisor that might reinforce the research question and the hypothesis that you might want to have by writing in a way that is even more, let's say, even that you can address the topic in a way that is even more suitable to even at some point use that research topic for your career development and for request for fundings. So if you read the literature and became the most knowledgeable person, is much more likely that your research hypotheses are based on a fundamented literature that has been already published, and that what you envision to investigate is a really strong hypothesis and strong aim. But for that, you really need to become an expert. More questions that you would like me to address, please feel free to post it. Okay, so if there are no further questions, I really would like to thank you for the time that you dedicated and you invested in staying enrolled in this webinar. And I hope to see you soon with another topic that you might want to be clarified. Thank you very much. Bye and good luck.